Hello everyone, Sientir here with another Rambler for you, and today I kind of want to do a little bit of a grab bag. By that I mean there's a couple of topics that I think would be interesting to talk about, but as I've thought about them, I don't really feel like they would kind of fit or fill the full length of what I try to have a Rambler fill, I guess, because I usually aim for these to be about 10 to 20 minutes, and these feel like shorter subjects. So the first one is, okay. So the two subjects are kind of how I approach thinking about the Star Wars episodic movies and trilogies, and kind of a comparison in terms of my thought process to the Legend of Zelda video game franchise. And then the other one is something that I kind of call the success problem, which is where something being successful causes the context that it arose in to be lost. So I'm going to go ahead and just do them in that order, because that's how I was taught to do essays, right? Anyway, so the Star Wars trilogies, right now there's I guess 2 2/3. So we have the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and I don't know what... I've not heard of a specific term for the current one, episodes 7 and 8, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. By the way, I'm not planning on really getting into the story too terribly much, but more talking about these on a conceptual level. But if I think I'm about to kind of enter into story spoilers for the newer movies, I'll mention it, but I don't think anything will be particularly major. So with these trilogies, I mentally think of them as kind of different continuities, and the reason for that is because things don't really line up super well between them. This is especially notable between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, where the descriptions that Obi-Wan and Yoda give, and just some other characters as well, for the sort of time before the Empire, and their experiences don't really match up very well with what's presented to us in the prequel trilogy. In fact, some of the things are like technically correct if you really stretch that, but it just, the whole feel and spirit of it is very incorrect feeling. So I tend to think of them as sort of different continuities, where they have kind of a rough chronological order that you can assign to them, but they don't actually like connect. And this is kind of how I feel about the Legend of Zelda series, where the games, some of them definitely like are actual sequels, just like how there's different episodes that are like clearly connected, but the trilogies are kind of separate. And the Legend of Zelda games, there's a certain chronology that you can kind of come up with, but continuity is a little questionable. And sort of the Legend of Zelda games, to me, have always seemed to be a retelling or a different interpretation of sort of the Zelda mythos of the wise princess, the courageous hero, and the powerful villain. And the powerful villain being sort of an embodiment of evil, and the courageous hero, aided by the princess, the wise princess, rising up against it. And in many regards, how the tyranny of the powerful can be overthrown by the wise and courageous, sort of working together to topple it. And the overall flow of them tends to have some amount of similarity to it, although there's usually some amount of difference as well. And not all Legend of Zelda games feature these sorts of things going on, but a lot of what I'd consider more the mainline ones do. And when we look at the Star Wars movies, you have a lot of similar sort of motifs going on in terms of the Force and somebody having to kind of like rise up to use it and that sort of thing. But it's exploring, Star Wars, I feel, explores sort of the nature of the Force, but also the way that kind of power works and societies kind of can interact with that. And it feels like they often have a similar sort of underpinning themes, and it's just a different way of exploring the sort of concept, and with sort of a rough sense of chronology kind of associated with it. So, for example, The original trilogy explores the Force as kind of more of this mystical sort of thing, and it explores ideas connected to that, with sort of your hermits going on as your Jedi Masters. The original trilogy, then, it really does explore a lot of these ideas with regards to, like, what is the role of a Force user, and what can they do, how do they fight, how do the Jedi operate. These sorts of things are explored differently than I feel they are in the prequel trilogy, which is exploring how, in many regards, organized religion can become corrupt and fall in on itself, how society can fall in on itself, and it's exploring themes of collapse in many regards, of moral collapse, societal collapse, and its themes are different. They're exploring different things, but there's still sort of this underlying current. And I feel like the new ones are trying to pull ideas from the original trilogy for sure, because that's kind of what they're harkening back to. But I feel like the way that they're beginning to explore the Force is a bit different, and the way that it's kind of being interpreted. It's, in many regards, saying, how do we approach the legends of old? And when we find out they're real, how does that impact us? And so there's different sorts of themes going on that it's exploring with sort of myth and legend and reality and faith. But I feel like it's exploring sort of different angles of these concepts in just this, in a similar way that the Legend of Zelda series are exploring different angles and concepts with regards to how the hero is going about things, with regards to how the villain, the princess, and just how things express themselves. So anyway, like I said, the basic point is that I kind of view these sort of continuities as a rough order that you can assign to them, but they're not actually continuous. So that's probably slightly confusing, but hopefully it was clear, and it at least gotten people thinking a little bit. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, to transition to my other topic, is something that I call the success problem. So this is probably easiest to see with vaccines. So a vaccine is something that's designed to give herd immunity to the population, so that way, in effect, people stop getting a particular disease. A good example is like polio. Smallpox is an even better one. The idea is these diseases are awful. Let's not have people get sick with them. How do we achieve this? Well, we vaccinate against them. Enough people are vaccinated, we get something called herd immunity, where enough people are immune that the disease can't spread. So if somebody does get sick with it somehow, nobody else is going to catch it. And so it kind of insulates things so it doesn't have the ability to spread. It's kind of like how if you have a fire, if you make a big area where there's nothing to burn, the fire can't spread anywhere. It's that same sort of idea of containment, and it prevents the diseases from spreading around. The problem that then happens is people lose context of what the disease was like that was trying to be stopped. So you can see this with sort of the whooping cough, and I think it's whooping cough, measles, mumps, and rubella, those various vaccines, where there are people who don't know how awful those diseases were, and they think of the vaccines as somehow worse. And it's because the vaccines have been so successful at eliminating the presence of these diseases that it's very easy to no longer have the context for what those diseases did, what they were, and how awful they were. So this is a problem that can exist in all sorts of things. For example, I think Christianity can kind of suffer from this a little bit when you have too much of a Christian community, where a lot of stuff that the Bible talks about gets put out of context, because the context that it was written about and for doesn't necessarily exist in a pure Christian community. And I think that there are certain parts of the United States, for example, which have a high cultural Christianity quotient that have this problem of losing context for what certain Bible passages are about, because they haven't actually experienced what they're about. And this is because it's been too successful in kind of spreading. And it's very easy for people to kind of not have the idea of the context. So really what this problem can be kind of described as is a solution is proposed to some sort of thing that really people think ought to be solved. And then this solution is wildly successful, and because it's wildly successful, a new generation of people arises who do not have the context of the thing that the solution was meant to stop. And so if they stop practicing or they misapply the solution, you have this problem where people don't know how to interact with the solution properly because the context of what it was there to solve has been partially lost. And so this is a problem that I think can apply to a lot of different stuff, most likely. But it's an interesting thing to think about. And I would actually really like to hear any other sort of areas where you think this sort of thing has happened. Like I said, it's particularly noticeable with regards to vaccines. And I think it definitely applies to other things. It can apply to all sorts of like philosophical writings and other things where they saw a problem, they proposed a solution, and then their solution may lose some amount of context if it gets implemented and is very successful. So, or if the problem is a new problem is different than when that one was and people don't have context of that old problem. But that's a kind of a variant on it. So anyway, that's something to think about. And like I said, I'd love to hear of anything that you've particularly experienced that has this particular success problem where a solution being successful causes the context in which that solution was created to be lost, and therefore people don't understand some element about the solution properly anymore. Anyway, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for me today. So I hope that you have a great week. And so I'm going to go ahead and give my little ending spiel. So if you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/SientiersRamblers. You can email me directly if you want to at sientir@gmail.com. And if you are so inclined, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Sientir. And Sientir is Sientir. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.